Once you've conducted your needs assessment, the next step is to make a community map. So what is community mapping? Community mapping assesses the resources that are available in your community. Just like how each community has different needs, each community also has different resources. Sometimes these resources can be called assets. Assets can include facilities such as community centers, local businesses, and parks. They can also include people and their abilities and skills, and organized community groups. The key thing to remember about community mapping is that it's all about the positives. Often, when we're looking at a community, we pay attention to the problems in that community, such as a lack of green space or high unemployment. Community mapping tells us that instead, we should look at what is valuable in the community. This approach helps us recognize that our communities do have the tools to solve the big issues we want to solve. We just need to look at things from a different perspective to find them. When you're community mapping, there are 3 types of assets to look for. Individual assets are the abilities, talents, and skills of people. For example, one member of your group might be very confident with using social media to promote your project. You'll also want to include yourself in this category. Think about what skills, talents, and abilities you have that can be used to solve a need. Personality tests, such as the 16 personalities, can help you identify your own personal skills and how they can be incorporated into a project. We've included additional resources for personalities and strength assessments in the Dropbox. The next type of resource is community assets. Community assets are associations through which community members can come together, such as teams, volunteer groups, social groups, and cultural societies. For example, there might be a local group that advocates for women's rights in your community. In a later video, we'll discuss a bit further in detail how we can reach out to different community partners and groups to have them help with our projects. The third type of asset is institutional. Institutional assets are positive institutions in your community, such as community centers, schools, cafes, parks, and libraries. So how does this apply to your project? By engaging in community mapping, you can determine what resources are in your community. This can both be used to determine what your project should be and what resources are available to help you implement your project. You might identify a local community center at which you can host your project, or identify a local environmental group that can supply trainers for your project. Community mapping helps to sync up the resources in the community with the needs of that community. Now we're going to look at a worksheet that can help you map out your community's resources. So in this chart, you can see that there are 4 columns. So what we'll want to identify when we're community mapping are the name of the asset, such as a community youth center, graphic design skills, or a local women's group. The type of asset, so that would be institutional, individual, or community, as we discussed previously. How it is an asset to the community. So for example, a community youth center might host events and workshops for youth in the community, and a specific team member might have skills in graphic design. And the last question you'll want to answer is how this resource can benefit your alumni project. So a community youth center might have space that you could host your project at, and might also have trainers that you could work with for your project. If an individual has graphic design skills, that team member might be able to create promotional materials to advertise the project on social media and recruit participants. So in this video, you've learned what community mapping is, why you should do it, and what kind of assets you can identify through your community mapping. After watching this video, fill out the community mapping chart that we've included in the Dropbox. This can be done by yourself or with other members of your project team. After you've done that, move on to the next video to learn how to brainstorm ideas for your project.